Good evening, and welcome to another production here on blackdoctor.org. I am Ellis Dean, the Director of Digital Programming and Production at Black Doctor, and you are watching Get Checked, Get Fit, Get Moving with Doc Griggs, but it's not just me and Doc Griggs tonight. As you can see, there are other people here that we're going to introduce you to here momentarily. So, a couple of things I want to remind you to do. Number one, let us know where you're watching from. That is most important. We like to get people to tell us where they're watching us from all over the nation, all over the world. So please, please, please let us know where you're watching from. Number two, please share this program, tag a friend that needs to hear this information. We definitely want them to become involved and be part of the program. So tag, like, and share this program. And number three, if you have any questions, please put those in the comments. We love to answer your questions, anything you have, any questions that you might have throughout tonight's program. So this, the people that you see, 2 weeks ago, we did a program called Healthcare is a Family Affair. And we had Doc Griggs' family on, his dad and whatnot. So he held my feet to the fire and said, we have my family on, you had his family on, so now I gotta have now it's my turn. So the people that you see on the screen are my family. So we have Angela Dean Baham and her husband Nick. Angela Dean Baham is my blood sister, is my sister. We have Cliff and Gwen. Those are my aunt and uncle. Cliff is my mother's brother. We have Marlo, and she is Cliff and Gwen's oldest daughter and my first cousin. And then we also have Wade Dean on my father's side. He is my father's brother's oldest son, son, and he is my first cousin on my father's side. So as you can see, and I will tell you the kind of the background for this is one of the things we hear in our community, and I'm saying our community as a Black community, is we always hear about first, right? The first to do this, the first to do that. And sometimes it's a narrative that gets played out a little bit too much in our community. I think that's personal opinion, because we have been doing, as a community, we've been doing things for a long time, right? And we've had MDs going all the way back to before the turn of the 20th century. So we understand that American culture celebrates the first, but for our culture, we know there's not. But we know in families there always is a first. And on my mother's side, the first was my grandfather. Grew up in rural South Carolina on a family full of sharecroppers and siblings, and they were all on the farm. They grew up on a farm, and something in my grandfather said, "You know what? I can do more. I can do better." And he went off to the big city of Columbia and finished his high school diploma, and eventually that's where he met my grandmother, and eventually went off to college, and they both finished college, and the rest is history. And so they inspired in their children about education, and education became a focus. So I'm going to shut up there because you didn't sign on to hear me, especially with my family here. So we'll start with Cliff and Gwen. First question is, what was that like, and what was it like growing up with grandmother and grandfather in terms of their focus on education, and what influence did that have on you?
Well, grandfather Joseph Clifton Roche was a stickler about education and self understanding, that you should be a person that understands where you came from, what was important to you, and to have self-esteem. And I think one of the biggest things he always dealt with in terms of, and my mother too, Margaret, we all were inundated with self realization. That is, whatever you do when you go out into the world, you should project. We got a cat in here. Project um, the best that you can. Self-reliance. And so we grew up in an era in the 50s where there was segregation, right? So a lot of the companies and a lot of the businesses were owned by Black people. And we understood that Black people could actually do many things and project themselves and conduct business and be university presidents and so forth and so on. So, to make a long story short, what we always thought about in our community, and not just my father and my mother, but all the people that were around us, is that you had something that you can do and you should be proud of yourself. And that projected itself to the next generation, I think.
Marlo, as the person that grew up in the home of Cliff and Gwen, did it project itself onto the next generation?
It did, but I think the way that they approached it in our household as a child was a lot more exploratory than maybe they experienced. So, I mean, we were always encouraged to do well in school and excel to our highest um powers, but I never felt like that was a pressure. I think my parents and this, I'm curious now how this passed down through the generations, right? Like, you all definitely instilled curiosity in us, instilled, looking for information, using your mind to come up with reasonable understandings of the world, and especially as it pertains to health, to take care of yourself, to live well, was also part of that education, that we were supposed to be seeking these educations for our own sort of intellectual fulfillment, but also so that we could live well, and that was always really important to us.
Angela?
Yes, yes.
So,
Go ahead, Angela. Doc will come to
hello?
you. Yeah, Doc, we'll come to you in a minute. Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah,
So I would just say that I had a similar experience to what Marlo just described. Although I would say it was a little more directed than what Marlo just laid out her experience. But I mean, not in a harsh way. It was just more sort of this is what we do, and so you should be prepared to fall in line, figure out what it is that you want to do. But this is how we do things, and so get your ducks in a row, so to speak, and make sure that you're prepared to fall on in line and do what this family always does, right? Which is to climb higher, which is to seek to do what we call better in the United States. We'll talk about that later, I suppose. But anyhow, yes, definitely. What would you say, Dr. Baham? And I think I would add that we have continued that tradition with our son. He is currently, in college and doing well, and that's the expectation. So same style, I guess. No, I'm joking. He's very curious and wants to be where he is. But that it was always understood as well.
So Nick, I guess my question for you is, what was it like meeting the family and recognizing that was the general theme through all of the cousins that you encountered? You're like, okay, this is an interesting clan. What was that? How did that land on you when you first was introduced?
It was consistent with how I was raised too. Both my parents have master's degrees. My grandmother was the first LVN at San Francisco General Hospital, first Black LVN, San Francisco General Hospital. My grandparents only had third grade level educations, but they made that push when they came out here out west and demanded that their children, they only had each, my mother and father were only children. They demanded that their children had an education. They got their education at San Francisco State and then their master's degrees. So it was always an expectation. And the way our house was set up was we only had 2 bedrooms. And so my sister and I got the bedrooms, and the bedrooms were for us because they wanted us to study. So we had desks in the rooms, all this stuff to study. My parents made the sacrifice. They slept on a fold-out sofa in the living room. And that was for us to get our work done. So when I met Angela and I met the family, it was basically the same sort of vibe.
So Wade, I'm not going to say what that F stands for. That's so Wade, you grew up in rural South Carolina. What was the messaging that you got from Uncle George and Aunt Gloria?
I think broadly, I think it aligns with everybody has already said that striving for excellence was, I think, the predominant impetus, it was the goal, but also what the both of them tried to do in ways I've only come to appreciate now at this stage in my life is map out what excellence could be. Not say like what it's going to look like in this very explicit, concrete way, but pathways to that excellence, right? That it doesn't have to look like, as we would say, a stack of degrees. It doesn't have to look like being a first at anything. It's and not to be allegorical or wax poetic, but it was character. It was that when it comes to pop, can I wake up, look myself in the mirror, and then feel at peace at the end of the day at that image when I lay my head down? When it came with Ma, it was that my brother and I, we are capable of anything, and anybody's opinion contrary to that, well, that has no bearing on us. We did grow up in a small rural college town, and thankfully there was 2 HBCUs, there was Claflin and State, and those were resources that we could, or South Carolina State, I would say, resources for us to tap into, that broad network of care that, as I said, I've come to really appreciate. But within that household that we have, I walked out of that house every day feeling like I could do anything, that limits were somebody else's business, that whatever I endeavored to dream, that I could accomplish, and that was that foundation. As I said, less about excellence, but more about this necessary expression of care that is very much ingrained. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So Doc, you're hearing this, and what are your first thoughts, and what questions would you want to ask of my family?
So first of all, I want you to know that my family's watching. My mama Cynthia and my dad are watching now. So I would be rude if I did not say hello. Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. Took me a minute to get in. My pops had to call me, Eric, you need to cut your lights up. You can't see. They can't see you. I had to get it right. This is my first time. If you were at the house, I would offer you something to eat or drink. Welcome. What I hear, though, and the purpose of this show is that, we always tend to look externally. Black History Month is Black History Month, and we recognize, and, a lot of times we don't look at the superheroes from whence we came and the ones sitting right beside us. I tell you, I get the little kid goosebumps thinking back to the show that we did a couple weeks with my family. And now I'm here again. I feel like we're all sitting in the same living room. And the comments were made, Ellis, that, Eric, we've never seen you that quiet. I'm like, well, grown folks was talking. And that's what actually kind of triggered the idea for this show. within our own families, we have examples of excellence that have been passed down through. I got dogs too. Stop it. Sorry, I got two little dogs. They want to fight. Showing out. Showing out. The traditions. I hear words like excellence, character. What Ellis and I had talked about before is like as times have evolved, it seems like there has been in our families, our community, the Black communities. I don't think we take time to recognize from whence we came, so we can see where we can pick up the baton and carry the torch. There seemed to be a different pride if you go back in the generations. I want to hear what it was like from your perspective growing up in the 50s. On excellence and holding each other accountable, and then how it related to everything, education and health. A lot of the kids these days think they're the first to do everything, and it's obviously not the case. So thank you and welcome. They hear enough of me talking all the time. I want to dive back into your family, Ellis.
Okay.
I have a thought. Can I, I don't know if you have another question, Ellis, but something just occurred to me.
No. Please. This is an open discussion.
Yeah. So it also occurs to me that, we also have a strong we are family of educators also. Yes. So there's also a thread and a through line, at least on the Roche side of our family, Ellis, where we have from grandmother teaching kindergarten all the way to, your mom and Aunt April, to many of us who, even though we're teaching at multiple levels, we're all teachers. I consider myself a teacher, at the very heart of it. I'm a professor at Purdue now, but, it is also what I like to think about our communities are those spaces where we have both the emphasis on education, but we also had Black people who saw education as a valuable asset to the community, that was like a worthwhile profession. And grandfather, why am I not mentioning that grandfather was also a teacher? I want to make sure I represent all the teachers. Everything's coming into my brain. But do you know what I mean? Like there would be resources where people said, I want to pursue the life of an educator. We no longer live, I think, in a time where that feels well compensated. It doesn't feel respected. It doesn't even feel safe in some cases. So I'm a lot of times I'm really concerned about where are we going to go if we don't have that rootedness and we have control over our own educations,
Yeah, that is important. Speaking of, talking about some of the times in the 50s and 60s with people having to be more insular because they were kind of forced to be that way. That develops self-reliance. Sometimes when you are, involved with other environment, you think that somehow you have to be a part of that. And to some extent you do, because that's the way the world is. But there is a place where you have to understand who you are and what you can do for yourself. And that's part of what we, I think, have to kind of keep a hold of, because we're in times where some people are shooting at this community, and we have to understand where we are and who we are.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that, and you're right, Marlo, there was that sense of educators, right? And saying the importance of education. And it felt like it was more for knowledge sake versus personal gain, right? And so it was, you need to learn as much as you can because you can.
Yeah, right.
Not because you're going to take this and you're going to go and make $1 million or $1 trillion. It's just like education is important because this is how our community can continue to move forward. And so that ability to, and those of us that had demonstrated ability to learn at society's levels that said we're high achievers.
Yeah.
What was taught to us was a responsibility to continue our education and pay that forward back to our community and contribute back to our community. That's what I felt a lot more, even though, as Angela said, and Gloria Dean is not here. So yes, it was much more dogmatic in her approach.
And I don't want to let your Uncle Cliff and Aunt Gwen off the hook too much. Like they just let us don't get it twisted. I know they do auntie and uncle that's like, the laid back auntie and uncle, but do not get it twisted. There were limits.
Let me chime in. I need to chime in at this point.
Okay, Mom.
I loved how Marlo described how she was raised or reared or whatever. Mm-hmm. We always had this thing from the time they could utter a word that learning is fun. We were trying to trick her, but learning is fun.
Right.
So I think somehow it stuck. We had different things that we did with them, but we let them pretty much be free spirits, but not brats, but free spirits.
Right.
And with learning is fun and being a free spirit, they sort of set their own way of educating themselves. We provided it for them. We put it there for them, but it was up to them to grasp it and to do with it what they could. And I'm proud to say that they did well. A lot of people would not allow their kids in our generation. I think we are the elders here. In our generation to have so much free range. But we allowed our kids to think for themselves. Now we had to rein them in. We had to stop them at some points. We had to put our 2 cent worth in, but pretty much that was our way of carrying the torch.
Right.
It wasn't traditional, but it was just the way that we chose to do.
And you have
I have a question.
Have PhDs now, so you must have done something right.
Absolutely. I have a question, and this came up again a couple of weeks ago. So what we don't know, and we always say that if it was us, I woulda. What was the value on education and the difference in the feeling of family? And most importantly, we talk about health. What was the difference between growing up with Jim Crow prior to segregation and the value on education, the value of health and accountability for each other in the community? How have you seen that evolve? What have you seen? I know what we see, but what from your purview, from that lens, from the 50s, 60s, even beyond or before?
Well, I would say as I was growing up, the people in our community were very close knit, and when you lived in a community that was segregated at that time, you had a big strata of people. That is, you'd have people who own businesses and people who were PhDs and doctors at the university, living in the same community that some people who were the janitors or not, or whatever, just regular workers. So the community was a lot more blended, but everyone could talk to every person's child. And it was a community type of a thing where if you were someplace and did something, Sam's mom could say something to you and could, get you in line about what you were doing. I don't know whether that's so much the way things are currently, and I don't know whether that's necessarily good or
They're not.
bad, but it possibly is good in a certain sense to have a certain amount of community.
Dr. Griggs, I'd like to sort of respond to that question as well. When I was growing up, and I grew up in a different community than my husband, he was in South Carolina, I grew up in Florida. And where I grew up, you know, I grew up in the household of a single mother. And we went to the doctor when we were sick. We went to the dentist when we had a toothache. I mean, health was important because no one wanted to be sick. But with lack of knowledge and money to some, you know, with a single mom, it was money, it was financial. We had to attend to our health needs as necessary. So it was a little difficult, you know, but we survived it and we grew up healthy. I had a teacher who lived next door to me who always said that his sickest kids, the kids who had the most problems with health, were the ones that their parent had to wash their hands. They had to do all of the things necessary to keep the germs away. But the healthiest kids were the ones who wallowed in the mud, you know, and got dirty, you know. So you have to think that even though we didn't have the medical knowledge that we have now, that there was a sense of what needed to be done as far as our health was concerned.
It may be health.
So you took the ball and dunked it in the rim. Go ahead, Ellis.
Well, I was going to ask Wade and Nick what, because both of them, well, most of y'all are teaching at a university level. Do you feel that today's students, and particularly students of color, lack a certain amount of intellectual curiosity? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Wade, do you want to take this one first?
I know my kids are profoundly curious. To the point, I think any teacher worth their salt relishes in the opportunity to be challenged by their students, because it reminds us that we are still students ourselves. I think in this particular moment that we're in, and I think I want to try to bring it all full circle with everything that's been said so far. Like, you know, Ellis, you, and Angela, granddaddy was himself a principal before he was an ag man, and grandma was a teacher. And being an educator during that moment, it's only gotten to this period in my life where I really appreciate that. It was a radical practice of passing down the word, because we are just learning with told, let's say, supposed CRT mess and the like, and as my shirt implies, books are being banned, but the word still needs to be passed. I think about not specifically my mother's mother, who also taught in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and within the community, her position as a third grade math teacher is treasured, but as an occupation, you're unseen. And what I mean by that, with an economic sense, you can't even you're not even paid actual money. You get what we call scrap, brown piece of paper that the superintendent signed, and you can only spend it at certain stores. You're not even seen as being competent, no matter how many degrees you have. Your white counterparts themselves, who relish in their mediocrity and also to be able to ascend from that mediocrity. Are able to like, with the occupational sense, run circles around you. Then you still have to like pass down the word, and going back to what I said before, remember who you are. And that's what that word is being passed down, not only to like, our parents, but not, and also to us, and as we do to students. And those students are curious now as to like, well, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with when we walk out of like the sanctuary of a classroom that I try to make, and you have to deal with, to be candid, a lot of white folks that want to unsee you, not to be detested by the sight of you, but to unsee you. How do I remember, what do I look like when I look at myself, or who I am when I look at myself in the mirror? Goes back to that character thing. And so that's the one thing, that's the root of the curiosity, right? Because I could give them every book I can give them, but how do I teach them, and how do I like invite them and encourage them to take that text, right, and put that thing into like radical practice, right? And what I mean by radical practice, because like we're dealing in an era now, like it says, educators are being not only fired from the jobs, but also harassed. They're being called, right?
I have a story about that today, Wade.
You see what I'm saying? And so, I mean, so I guess what I'm getting back to is that, as I'm trying to get full circle, I've only come to appreciate the weight of passing down the world while Black for my grandparents and their parents, right?
Yes.
While also raising multiple children in a house and not making the money that you can make, because you're not even making money. You got a brown piece of paper.
Yes.
And you can't even get the stuff that you know that your kids deserve. And the only thing you can give them is, it's going to be better, and I need you to keep pushing it forward. And so, like, going back to my kids, yes, they're curious, yes, but they're also wanting to know, like, yo, this is scary out here. I'm curious as to, like, what am I going to do when the world tries to kick me in the teeth? Right? And don't give me no BS, don't give me no allegories or no anecdotes. What do I do? How do I feel safe and whole again? Because that itself is not always a pretty picture. You know what I mean? Right? In this particular moment where we're trying to really like challenge and trouble iteration, let's say a Black masculinity therein, for example. Let's say, for example, our grandfather, Ellis Dean, why did that man never smile? Well, he had a hell of a lot of shit on him generationally. Right? And we can't pathologize that, but we don't want to reproduce that. We want to also refuse conditions that could reproduce that. So that, within that broad context, that's the curiosity that sometimes comes within a succinct question, or sometimes it's messy. But it's my job to really like patiently sit with them and navigate that through them, not necessarily within one classroom or one class or one lecture, but sometimes like over months, sometimes over like, I don't even teach this child anymore, but 2 years later, he's calling me like, because they call me by my first name, Wade, I don't know what to do. And I'm not going to BS maybe like, well, I know, I'm going to give you the answer, because sometimes I don't know either, but we're going to figure it out. So hopefully that in some way answered your question.
Nick?
Well, for context, I mean, I have the similar experience to Wade, and I'm sure a similar experience to Marlo. My students are interested in radically decolonizing themselves from all expressions of whiteness. So just for context, I'm a professor of ethnic studies, California State University, East Bay. They are done. They are done with the way that they're taught to eat and what to eat. They're done with capitalism. They're done with just any expression of white supremacy altogether. And they're looking for new things for themselves. In terms of health, it really plays where it plays a big role, again, is in nutrition, eating well, even going back to pre-colonial forms of eating and what to consume and what's healthy, herbs, things like that. And then in terms of your mental health as well, they're fascinated by those things. So they're highly curious. But I think we've come to an end. I think it's very exciting for us as professors, because it feels like we're coming to another period of another level of challenge of whiteness and white supremacy. And it does feel exciting to be there with students while they're doing these things.
Oh, wow.
Can I add to that? Just a quick aside. I mean, I just want to amplify the idea that the students are curious. Many of them, most of them, I think we're not always equipped to recognize what their curiosity looks like in a digital age. Those of us who are, Gen Xers and older, who've lived a straight up analog life until adulthood and then suddenly have been given these tools.
Right.
So born digital generations, some of the millennials, the Gen Zers they're curious, but their means of sort of communicating that with people, their methods for satisfying those curiosities are different. And so, I think this is where that generational, I'm so happy we're having this intergenerational conversation. That's exactly where those conversations can grow. And I think they grow when we, again, approach those who are younger than us, not in a space of judgment, right, off the bat. We may have guidance, we may have wisdom, we may have things we want to share or put into context. Yep. But if the jump is, I already know and you don't know and you're not ready, we alienate so many young people. And I agree with Nick and Wade, and I think Angela, even though you haven't spoken to this, but I think you also get it, like that so many of these young people are really fed up with the way things are and would love. I think this is what's behind the self-care movement too. Is this radical, so all the younger folks are like, self-care, I'm taking a mental health day. And sometimes, I don't know, I've been in conversations myself like this where I'll be like, y'all can't take a self-care day every day. Like, wait, you had to be at work and you had to stay there the whole day. And then you had to be back there at the same time the next day. And these kids are like, I want to work in my house. I want to be able to wear elastic waistbands. I want, you know what I mean? But, and I know I'm kind of playing with that idea, but there's something to it. And they're teaching us something about how to enter these capitalist labor spaces where we are being, for a lot of us, working really hard and not really being paid our worth, right? How do we manage that so that we can maintain our livelihoods despite that the people who came before us work what they say, their fingers to the bone.
Right.
Remember that phrase, working your fingers to the bone. We do not want that. Anybody to be working, you know what I mean? Like, so how can we manage lifestyles that can incorporate self-care, loving oneself, prioritizing health and sleep and all those things, as well as, being these excellent Black folks that our families are raising us to be?
That's a great answer and a great way to segue to the conversation about health, right? And so when did you start having conscious thoughts about your health, your wellness, and making those changes if you had to make any changes to maintain and or improve your health in your life? And anybody can jump in. But when did that first light bulb kick in your mind and just say, you know what? I need to be doing more or about staying healthy or getting healthier in my life?
I was 60 years old, which is bad. No, actually, but it's true in a way because, and I think that is indicative of a lot of people.
So give the context. Give the context.
Yeah.
He was an athlete in high school and in college.
Yeah.
Playing basketball.
Yeah. So I always thought that health was kind of just something that happened. And so what Marlo was saying earlier was, I think it's something that you have to be conscious of a little bit. You have to think about. And between the time that you are a young person and everything is working good and you don't even have to think about it, and that time when you kind of neglect it, and some people do, some people don't. If you neglect it, that is the time that you have a lot of the issues. And so, after I played basketball, did all that kind of stuff, and did it a little bit even after I finished school, just playing around out in the streets. I didn't think about some of the things and there's physical health and there's mental health, and
Right.
sometimes we don't think about the two and how they relate to each other.
I've always been sort of health conscious as long as I can remember. I always went for my annual physicals from my adult years after I started having children. I always have my mammograms. As a matter of fact, I'll be going in Tuesday for that. I just always wanted to be healthy. Eating was my problem. I had to really learn how to eat healthy. My kids helped me a lot with that, by their vegetarian diets for many, many years. I learned how to cook both ways with meat as well as vegetarian. We're not total vegans because, we do eat meat, but you had to learn
Flexitarian,
how to
flexitarian.
flexitarian, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Although it's sort of limited to certain types of meat like fish, or maybe some poultry or something like that. But I think that eating was my problem. Going to the doctor, getting checkups, and even though I did all of those things, different things did happen along the way. I'm a cancer survivor. I survived uterine cancer. I am 4 years cancer free as a few months. So I'm really proud of that. And I was telling Cliff, I wanted to share with you all when I was diagnosed, I went and also had a genetic evaluation to see whether or not my type of cancer would affect my two daughters. And I'm happy that I did that, so that I could pass that information along to them so they could possibly, gain some insight from what happened to me.
And I mean, if I can just jump in as one of those daughters, I mean, I'll just add that information is valuable, right? So what I see is a thread around communication and upfrontness about health in the family. Like I have memories of, all along the way you've had, you or dad or both of you have had some version of some kind of health talk or doctors. I've had children, so all of that, just checking in on certain things, and then also telling me about your health journey as you've aged has informed me as I'm aging now, and looking at different life stages that I'd never thought in my brain, I knew mathematically I would eventually get to a certain age. But you're like, suddenly you show up and you're like,
You hope. Yeah.
oh no,
I'm here, right?
it's wild.
It is.
But I credit a lot of my preparation for it to them and their positive attitude, honestly, about aging. You all have just given us such a blueprint of how to age gracefully and well, and how to enjoy oneself, and that to age and have longevity and flexibility, and can get on a plane and go, or go to a concert, or walk to the car, like knowing that you can do those things with your grandkids, or we go travel and do those things together, is also a kind of health message that you're providing to the family and to the generations. Yeah.
Angela, I'm gonna say, like, I don't remember when we were growing up having health conversations. I just remember, like, if you got sick, I know there were some staples, and this is probably a staple because Doc and I talked about this before. It was a staple in every Black home. You had your BC powder, you had your NyQuil, and you had to rub and you had to rubbing alcohol, and every once in a while you had some Vicks Vapor Rub during the wintertime, and that was pretty much your
Kale quick
medicine.
tape.
Fair enough.
A little Pepto every once in a while if somebody got, but that was pretty much it. And the only time we talked about health was when somebody was in poor health. So, Angela, for you, when was that moment that you said, you know what, I got to eat healthier or I need to exercise, that you made a conscious decision about your health?
Very good question. I think that being healthy and presenting and projecting a certain image was built into the profession that I had chosen as a performer. And so I think just kind of fell into some good habits around keeping yourself well. And of course, that was also a model that was given for us to keep yourself well looking. And there are things that you have to do to present that, right? So I do remember mom would always take walks around the block. And so that model was given. What do you need to do? You need to take care of your health on a daily basis. Here's how you do that, right? You go out and you exercise. You socialize with your friends. That is a mental health opportunity, right? So you're connected to other people. We grew up in the church, so you have that spiritual connection, right? There were always social engagements and other kinds of activities that we participated in. Stay up and down the road, staying connected to family. All of those things are also mental health opportunities, as well as just just being connected to folks is how you survive and how you find your ground, your where you want to stand. So I think lots of different kinds of models, maybe less direct, but still absorbed. And then I think too, for me personally, as I was I chose to broaden my spectrum of what are some of those things that will help me remain healthy, live healthy, and grow into old age as a healthy person. I did want to just share a couple of things, though, that even with that understanding of being a person that needed to be active about and proactive about my healthcare, I did experience some of the same kind of outcomes that you read about, since now everything's out there in the open, and we're learning more and we're researching more about what the impacts are on Black patients. I did experience some of those adverse events in my life as well, in terms of around my pregnancy, around other issues, and then also taking advantage of alternatives. Like I had a midwife, so that was a doula, rather, excuse me, and that was a good thing for me personally. So yeah, not to go on, but and now as I go through menopause, yes, the M word, and it is a thing.
You're gonna have to send me notes, Angela.
I'll try. Yes, but it's definitely a thing. And so as I'm going through that, I would just say that also that there have been some shifts in how people access healthcare, right? So there's the online opportunity, there's making your appointments through apps. There's just a lot of different shifts. There's the 30-minute appointment, in and out. So what do you need? Blah, blah, let's get it done. That kind of thing. Those things have also impacted, I think, how I access healthcare and how I think it has an overlay on my ability to thrive. I'll say it like that. So those are some things for us to think about as we're thinking about the future of healthcare for Black folks in the country.
Nick, when did your thoughts about health come into play at a significant point in your life, or was it just always there?
I mean, to some degree, there were episodes, but it was always there because, in spite of my mother's education, there was a child between myself and my sister. I was the firstborn, and that would have been I would have had a brother, but there was medical malpractice where my mother's white male OBGYN, when my mother's water broke, he told her to just chill because they still have that view of, black women can just go and deliver a baby out in the fields. It's no big deal, right? So I lost a brother because of that, and I knew that at a very young age. Also, again, I mean, there were many moments through my life, but then also losing my mother in 2018 to her cancer, her fight with cancer, and largely because her primary care physician misdiagnosed her symptoms of pancreatic cancer as a UTI. And while that was being misdiagnosed, her cancer advanced to stage 3.
Wow.
But sort of echoing some of what Gwen said, my sister and I were able, because we have the information, we were able to keep my mother alive and well for 3 years, mostly through a vegetarian diet, which complemented the low level of chemo that she was doing. So she lived a quality life for the 3 years. It, was downhill at the end, of course. But, and I think what we've done as a strategy as a family is that most of my family out here have died at Kaiser Hospital through the HMO. So my attitude is I will not die at Kaiser. I'll die anywhere, but I will not die at Kaiser Hospital. So we spend money for a PPO plan so we can get access to all the research hospitals in this area. We have quite a few of them.
Right.
So we're spending more, but look, I've seen many generations of the impact of having an HMO plan.
Right. Wade, you're looking fit. You got the t-shirt on with the muscles popping. So just
leave it to your cousin.
I wonder how long you were going to let that go, Ellis.
You got to put him on blast, don't you?
You do it. Come on, man. Come on.
I knew it was coming.
I am all of 5 foot medium and have yet to grow into my head, so I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, growing up, my brother and I, we would have what you would call an abundance of energy, and so as a means of maintaining peace of mind, my dad just kept us in a whole bunch of sports, primarily soccer. Dad, when it came to, I guess, physical fitness, he played a lot of golf. Of course, I mean that was his thing. I didn't take to it. Between the 3 of us, Ellis and Angela, we also had our Uncle Lewis, who was himself always active, primarily running, and I think also bike riding as well. For me, at this stage of life, it's kind of a two-pronged thing that I navigate. Of course, I love running. It's something that helps me to settle myself. In addition, with all the things I'm wading through at the moment, no pun intended with my name. But also when it comes to running, and this is something that I remember we were having a conversation at your crib, Ellis, and I remember I was telling you, as a means of just this necessity, when I'm in Georgia. So I split my time between here in LA and Athens, Georgia, with my fiance. And whenever I'm over there, and especially in July, LA does have me spoiled. I can just walk out the house now, it just feels sexy, just 60 all the time, save for when it's raining. But when you're in July and it's Georgia, the sun's not up yet. It's pitch black dark 5 a.m. and it's just humid. But I still get running. I remember Ellis, you would say to me, you were just forthright, excuse my French, what the hell are you thinking? You are Black. You cannot be running in Georgia like that. And I thought you were tripping until Ahmaud Arbery.
Right.
And that particular thing. I guess what I'm getting at is that there's levels to this. I mean, even when you're trying to have, live well and like take care of yourself, you still got to deal with somebody else's preconception of who you are and where you should be and how you hold space in public while being Black. Because even as you say, like, well, Wade, you were fit.
Yeah.
I fit a profile because I guess I have a certain musculature, right? And that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, when it comes to like behavioral and cognitive, like as I said, like growing up when I was young, I had an abundance of energy. Like I was not my cousin's favorite baby cousin at that moment. I was, which we call, very irritating to them. I won't admit to that, but that I get it. But at this, to keep it real, I was diagnosed with adult ADHD 6 years ago. And to be honest with you, I always knew I had it. And I remember being younger. This was, in the late 80s, early 90s, where like this was a thing, but the research was not there in order to really attend to it. All folk knew to do was like, give a Ritalin, it'll be all right. And mine was like, well, no, that's not it. Little did I know as I was, from my teenage years to my 20s, 30s, and now I'm 43, prior to being diagnosed, I was doing things to self-medicate. And what I'm getting at is like, as in the wake of me being diagnosed, I've had to learn necessarily not how to like treat ADHD as a pathology, but more so as a neurodivergent way of thinking the world, right? Insofar as that there are certain behaviors that comes with having ADHD that if you didn't know what they were, you would pathologize them, right? Time blindness. I am late all the time. I was late to this call. That's because my relationship with time is completely, it's not skewed, but like 5 minutes for me.
It's just different.
Right.
That's what neurodivergence is, right? It's these
exactly.
differences.
It's
right?
all these things that come with it. I've had to learn that affects every facet of my life, right? But also within the context of like Blackness and Black identity, we are still developing language and ways of sitting with this in ways that we don't like internally pathologize like within ourselves, right? We feel like something's wrong with it or that I'm broken, I remember having a conversation with a family member and I tried to impart and be vulnerable and talk about my ADHD. And I remember he said to me, you need to keep that to yourself because nobody gonna hire you. And I think about I got plenty of kids who themselves, Black kids, who have some mode of neurodivergence. And they feel like they got to keep it to themselves within the context of the classroom because they try to articulate to, let's say, their teacher in the midst of COVID and how that that's a profound upheaval in our world, right? For example, and they just trying to keep up with their work while like navigating everyday life, and they got neurodivergence. And somebody's gonna tell them like, okay, you were late on your assignment, you get an F. I don't care about that, right? I guess what I'm broadly getting to is like, I think a part of health and wellness is not just a singular thing. It's not an individual thing for me. It's a mode of care that we all share, right? Not only as a community, but also as a family. Because within the context of ADHD, this is genetic, right? This didn't pop out of nowhere. It is a through line from mother and father. That means somebody, a generation prior to me, was dealing with this and did not have the language or the care to navigate it. And let's say, for some reason, they did something, and this goes back to that whole adage of being excellent. Because they didn't meet the bar, they were called lazy. When they were trying to do the best that they can. And sometimes you internalize it, and sometimes you find rather toxic ways of dealing with it, so you can reach that level of excellence. But you didn't learn how to be a full person.
Right.
And I think for me, as I've all at 43 and learning who I am now with this mode of ADHD, and I guess what you said, Ellis, some type of musculature. I'm just trying to learn ways of loving on me, and so that I can more dynamically love on those I love the most.
Amen to that, and that we'll let that kind of wrap up as we're hitting close to the hour mark. But I will say this in terms of health and wellness and um, for me, it became when I would see somebody in our family develop something, right? And especially as I got older, because Cliff, like you know, I was when I was young, it was like I'm not feeling good. Call a couple of your boys up. We go run up and down the court a couple of times. I'm feeling great. But was I eating right? No. Was I really exercising on a basis? Not really. I was just kind of playing sports that I enjoyed, but and I called that exercise. And then growing up, it was by happenstance because with mom being a school teacher and having those summers off, you couldn't be in the house in the summertime. You was like because you had to go outside, and when you went outside, you got with the neighborhood kids and y'all rode bikes and went around and explored. So you got exercise by default. You got fresh food by default because you couldn't afford them fast foods, and there was McDonald's was a treat. It wasn't something that you could just eat on a regular basis, and so you were getting home cooked meals by default. So all of those things kind of played into my early health formations, and then father develops prostate cancer, so you start learning, hey, there's a genetic component to that. So at 35, I started getting tested and making sure that my PSA levels were fine. And then
Yes.
mother cholesterol is high, and I realized I got high cholesterol too. So I've got to now change and modify my diet for that. And notice my blood pressure is getting a little funny. So, but being in this space has made me much more cognizant of that, and talking to physicians as my profession has made me more cognizant of it. And that's why when I started engaging with you all at Thanksgiving, I was asking all those health questions because it's important. And the theme of this program and the program we did 2 weeks ago and going forward is it's important for families to have those health conversations, and not after the fact, not after somebody develops an illness or a disease or something. It should be that you have earlier on in life. And so I'm now trying to talk to my children about their eating habits, exercise, and watching sugar intake and salt and all these other things, because while your body is young and elastic and it snaps back really quickly, as those of us of a certain age have learned, that it does not snap back as easily when we get older, and it takes time and work. And so
It'll snap, just not back. It's can snap, but there's no back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's your medical opinion. I appreciate it.
But I will end with this.
Right, that's on page 365 of the medical journal. Snap, snaposis. Yes.
But I will end with this: is that Cliff and Gwen, you are, as Marlo stated, you are an inspiration, and my mother is too. I won't just sing it all out. Is that because I see how active you are and engaged all of you are, and so that gives me hope, right? In terms of, and I said that's how I would like to be, and so I'm trying to do the things now in that middle age point of my life to have the fruitful days. And so, Wade, I will say that your dad was the first Black golfer that I knew, and it kind of inspired me. So I'm a Black golfer, and so I'm open to say that.
I had to carry the torch because it's not me.
but yeah, your dad was the first Black golfer I knew. I said, Black people play golf? Like we do that? But I was always fascinated by when we would come to your house. I'd see that bag of clubs. I was like, man, that's an interesting thing to do. And then I go off to business school and realized it was a sport I needed to learn, and I just started liking it. Especially as I got older, when the snaps were coming more frequently when I was trying to play sports. Hamstrings can't take. Hamstrings can't take a run. So I just want to say thank you all for sticking with us. thank Doc for allowing us to come and come up with this idea. My family, I want to thank my family members, my sister, and brother-in-law, cousins, aunt, uncle. Mom is watching backstage. She didn't want to be on the show, but she's here. So
Hey, Aunt Gloria.
she's here. But just want to thank you all. But I do want to say to our audience that's watching, have those conversations. Don't wait. They are uncomfortable. I will say that up front. It was uncomfortable for me to ask my aunts and uncles about their health history, right? Because there's the dynamic there that doesn't change even when you become, 45 plus. Let's just leave it at that. So that dynamic does not change as you get older. But I will say this is that having those uncomfortable conversations can truly save a life. And moving forward. And so as a community, we have to have those conversations. And the earlier we can have them, the better off your overall health span will be. And if you want to know what the health span is you have your lifespan, and that's from birth to death. But the health span is a number of healthy years you have in your lifespan. And so what we're trying to do with this conversation and with this program and other programs that we have here on blackdoctor.org is to help you increase that health span. And so anything we can do, go to the website, make sure that you're finding out and getting that family health history so you can share it with your primary care physician, have real conversations with them too. They are bound by HIPAA, so tell them the truth. Dr. Griggs will tell you, don't go in there and lie to your doctor because they're going to find out in your labs. So we're gonna find
out the truth anyway. Truth come out.
Just tell them up front. Just tell them. And I promise you, your life will be happy, healthier, and wiser. So thank you all again. Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all staying with us. I see there's still people watching. So
Thank you.
It's interesting.
Thank you.
See y'all.
Thank
Good
you
to
all.
see everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all take care.